Judged by everyone for taking in a mere stray puppy, he gave up everything to save it. But when the dog repaid him with an unexpected act, no one could hold back their tears. Jonas wiped his brow as he navigated the crowded sidewalk, weaving through clusters of people hurrying to escape the relentless summer heat. Rush hour in the city had always felt suffocating, with horns blaring and street vendors shouting to grab attention. Yet on that particular evening, the congestion seemed even more oppressive than usual. Still, he couldn't afford a taxi, money was tight, and a bus ride home was the only reasonable option. Sweating under his faded polo shirt, Jonas turned a corner near a shuttered grocery store and almost tripped over something unexpected, a small German Shepherd puppy cowering by a lamppost. At first, he thought it was just another stray. This city teemed with animals forced to survive on scraps, but one glance at the puppy's trembling frame and the large, expressive ears perked up in anxious curiosity told Jonas this one was different. The pup was far too young to be fending for itself. He crouched down, heart already pumping from a long day of labor at the construction site. At a closer look, Jonas saw that the pup's ribs showed beneath a thin layer of fur. A patch of dried mud clung to its hind legs, and a small scratch marred the delicate skin above its eye. Even from a short distance, he could see the creature's chest rising and falling with rapid, shallow breaths. Something about those big brown eyes, reflecting both hope and fear, struck Jonas deeper than he expected. He'd rescued animals before, feeding a stray cat, or once returning an escaped parrot to a neighbor, but this was different. The tiny German Shepherd looked like it was at its limit, as though the city's harsh streets had already drained whatever energy it had left. "Hey, buddy," Jonas murmured softly, trying not to startle it. The puppy's ears twitched, but it didn't move. "You look like you're having a rough day." He reached into his pocket and found the remains of a sandwich he hadn't finished at lunch. Breaking off a small piece, he offered it on his open palm. At the scent of food, the pup took one tentative step forward, then another until it gently sniffed his hand. Cautiously, it licked the morsel, as if trying to decide whether to trust him. Moments later, the puppy devoured the scrap with surprising eagerness. Jonas couldn't help but smile. "All right," he said with a sigh that held both resignation and concern. "I guess you're coming with me." The truth was, he had no real plan. He lived in a cramped apartment with a strict landlord who barely tolerated Jonas's presence. There was no question about having pets. Yet as he gently scooped the tiny shepherd into his arms, its bony body pressed against his chest, he knew he couldn't just leave it behind. Something told him this small life was worth protecting. Navigating the last few blocks on foot proved tricky. The bus had been delayed, and Jonas decided it would be simpler to walk than wait in the sweltering air with a trembling puppy. By the time he reached his building, a rundown complex with peeling paint and flickering hallway lights, both he and the pup were exhausted. He could feel the stares of neighbors as he made his way up the creaking stairs. Mrs. Ramos, who lived on the second floor, peered out from behind her half-open door. Jonas offered a friendly wave, but her expression turned stern the moment she noticed the dog. There was no time to worry about that now. He had bigger concerns. Inside his tiny apartment, he placed the pup on the couch, rummaging for a towel and some leftover chicken. His living space was barely more than a single room. A bed in one corner, a small sofa by the window, and a kitchenette crammed into the opposite corner. He rarely hosted visitors, let alone a newfound canine companion. The puppy sniffed the worn cushions but seemed too weak to stand. Jonas set a shallow bowl of water on the floor. The dog looked at him, then down at the water, lapping it up with desperate eagerness. "Where did you come from?" Jonas asked aloud, not expecting an answer. The puppy simply blinked. Now that its fear had subsided slightly, Jonas could see a hint of intelligence in its eyes. German Shepherds were known for their sharp minds and loyal dispositions, traits that made them popular as working dogs. But seeing one so small and helpless on the street, it didn't sit right with him. Perhaps it had been abandoned or separated from its litter. He felt anger flare inside him momentarily, anger at whoever might have discarded such a creature. Then, as he gently stroked its fur, that anger dissolved into determination. He'd have to find a way to keep this pup safe, landlord or no landlord. A sudden knock at the door jolted Jonas. "Jonas?" a voice demanded from the hallway. "I know you're in there." It was Mr. Okada, the building manager, whose temper could sour at the slightest provocation. Jonas quickly glanced at the puppy, then tiptoed to the door, opening it just a crack. "Good evening, Mr. Okada," Jonas greeted in his calmest tone. Okada's eyes narrowed. "There are rumors you brought an animal in here," he barked, leaning forward as if attempting to peer around Jonas's shoulders. "The lease agreement forbids pets, you know that." Jonas's heart hammered, but he managed a steady reply. "It's not... Well, it's just a stray I found, sir. It's in bad shape. I plan on taking it to a shelter tomorrow." He felt a pang of guilt at that last statement, though part of him wanted to believe it might be the only option. Okada sniffed, tapping his foot on the worn linoleum hallway floor. "Make sure you do," he finally said. "I won't tolerate any rule breaking. Understood?" Jonas nodded. Understood. Only when Okada stomped down the hall did Jonas exhale, shoulders sagging with relief. He closed the door and turned to find the puppy struggling to stand on the couch, ears perked, eyes locked on him. It whined softly, as if it sensed his tension. "It's okay," Jonas said gently, scooping the pup into his arms again. Its tiny body felt warmer now, as though the simple act of resting in a secure place had reignited some spark of life. He settled on the couch, the puppy nestled against his chest. "We'll figure something out. But first, you need a name." He considered for a moment, glancing around the cramped apartment. On his coffee table lay an old picture of his late father, who had served in the military. In that photo, his father stood tall beside a proud German Shepherd who'd worked on the base, recognized as a hero for detecting hidden dangers. Jonas remembered how, as a child, he'd been in awe of that dog's bravery. The memory guided him. "I'll call you Tango," he whispered. "Yeah, that feels right. Tango." The puppy, as if acknowledging its new identity, offered a small wag of its tail. Jonas felt an unexpected warmth blossom in his chest, a sense of connection he hadn't realized he'd been missing. Life had been a series of repetitive days for him. Work, home, worry about bills, repeat. That cycle now seemed to crack slightly, just enough for a ray of hope to shine through. Even so, the question of where Tango would stay loomed large, especially if Okada pressed the issue. Jonas spent the rest of the evening cleaning Tango's scratch with antiseptic and carefully removing bits of dried mud clinging to his fur. To his relief, the wound above the pup's eye was superficial. The bigger concern was malnutrition. Every rib showed, and though Jonas didn't have much to spare, he opened a fresh can of tuna for Tango. The little dog devoured it in seconds, then curled up, exhausted, drifting into a deep sleep on the sofa. That night, Jonas slept poorly, anxious thoughts swirling in his mind. Would a shelter be able to care for Tango properly? What if the puppy got placed in a kennel for weeks? Or worse, what if no one chose him for adoption? Despite his uncertain future, part of Jonas couldn't bear the thought of handing Tango over to strangers. Dawn arrived in gentle pastels filtering through the thin curtains. Jonas awoke to find Tango quietly watching him from the couch. When Jonas stood and approached, the puppy's tail drummed softly against the cushion. Smiling, he patted Tango's head. "Morning, buddy," he murmured. "Hungry?" The enthusiastic wagging that followed was all the answer he needed. He opened the fridge and realized he had only a single egg, some stale bread, and leftover rice. Payday was still days away, and he usually budgeted just enough to cover his own limited needs. But now, he had Tango to think about. "You and I might be sharing noodles for a while," Jonas joked, cracking the egg into a pan. After cooking, he let the food cool, then split it so Tango would have a little breakfast too. The puppy ate gratefully, finishing every morsel before trotting in wobbly circles around the living room. Jonas recognized that Tango was still too weak for extended play, but he was encouraged by the pup's determination to explore. Just as Tango began sniffing around the kitchenette, a sharp knock echoed against the door once more. Jonas's chest tightened. Was Okada back already? But this time, it was Mrs. Ramos, the elderly woman from the second floor. Her stern face had softened into reluctant concern. "I heard you found a dog," she said in a hushed voice. Jonas tensed, expecting a complaint, but instead she extended a small plastic container. "It's some leftover chicken broth. Good for building up strength, I suppose." Jonas blinked, surprised. "Thank you. That's really kind." Mrs. Ramos cleared her throat and avoided his gaze. "Don't mention it. Just make sure that manager doesn't cause you trouble. You know he's looking for reasons to evict people." Then she turned, hurrying back down the stairwell before Jonas could say another word. Grateful for this unexpected generosity, Jonas heated the broth for Tango, who lapped it up happily. As the morning wore on, Jonas knew he had to make a plan. He had a shift at the construction site by midday. Leaving Tango alone was risky. The puppy was helpless enough, and if Okada discovered it, there'd be trouble. After a few phone calls and some whispered negotiations, Jonas managed to get in touch with Camilla, a co-worker who occasionally fostered stray animals. She lived in a small house on the outskirts of the city, with a fenced yard and a friendly golden retriever of her own. Camilla agreed to meet him that afternoon to see if Tango could temporarily stay with her. Relief washed over Jonas, though it was tinged with sadness at the prospect of letting the pup go. Yet Camilla's place would be safer, and Jonas could still visit. Perhaps, if everything went well, he could find a more permanent arrangement once finances improved, or once the landlord softened. By late morning, Jonas was running late to work. Tango tucked inside an old gym bag, the puppy's head poked out, surveying the world with renewed curiosity. On the bus ride, passengers glanced at them with various reactions, but Jonas ignored the stares. He was too focused on keeping Tango calm. Once they reached his stop, Jonas hopped off and navigated the dusty roads leading to the half-finished building. Stacks of bricks, rebar, and cement bags surrounded the site, with a cacophony of hammering and drilling echoing in the background. Camilla was already waiting by the entry gate, wearing her neon safety vest and hard hat. Her eyes lit up when she saw Tango's fuzzy ears emerge from the bag. "Oh, he's adorable," she said, immediately offering a gentle hand for the puppy to sniff. "And so small." Jonas exhaled, setting the bag down carefully. "He's been through a lot, Camilla. I found him on the street last night. I'm worried about him staying in my apartment." She nodded sympathetically. "I get it. My house isn't big, but it's dog-friendly. He'll be safe until we figure out a better solution. Might even be good for him to socialize with my dog. Don't worry, Jonas, we'll handle this." Relief swelled in his chest. "Thank you," he said quietly, handing her a small envelope with a bit of cash he'd scraped together. "For food, veterinary checkups, whatever he needs." Camilla hesitated before accepting it. "I'll keep track of every expense, and if we run short, I'll let you know. By the way, have you named him?" "Tango," Jonas answered, forcing a smile. "He reminds me of a brave shepherd I saw in a photo when I was a kid." "Perfect name," Camilla said, giving the puppy a gentle scratch behind the ears. "Don't worry, I'll take good care of him." Jonas watched her walk away with Tango, feeling a hollow tug in his stomach. He didn't want to let the puppy go, but this was for the best, right? That was what he kept telling himself as he clocked in at the construction site, tried to focus on mixing cement and carried bags of materials under the blazing sun. Yet an unease lingered, an intangible sense that something larger was unfolding, something that would change his life far more than he realized. Little did Jonas know that his decision to rescue Tango would set off a chain of events he could never have predicted. For that German Shepherd puppy, frail and fearful on the city streets, carried not just a spark of life but a secret that would rock Jonas's world to its core. Jonas spent the following week with a constant sense of restlessness. Although Camilla assured him that Tango was safe and adjusting well, he couldn't shake off the feeling that he'd abandoned the puppy at a crucial moment. Every day after his shift, he found himself tempted to skip the bus and walk the long route to her place, just to catch a glimpse of the little German Shepherd. It was a strange attachment. He'd barely known Tango for 24 hours, but the memory of the pup's vulnerable eyes haunted him. Inside that cramped apartment, it had felt like they were two survivors in a harsh world. That uneasy feeling only grew stronger when Camilla sent him photos of Tango snuggled next to her friendly golden retriever, Pacha. The pictures showed the pup looking healthier by the day, his once sunken eyes now bright and curious. Despite the relief of seeing Tango thrive, Jonas sensed an unspoken question lingering between them. How long would this arrangement last? Camilla's home was far from spacious, and fostering stray animals was her hobby, not her job. Though she never said so outright, Jonas sensed her gentle hints that Tango deserved a permanent solution, a real home to call his own. Late one afternoon, Jonas finally mustered the courage to take 2 buses and a 15-minute walk out to Camilla's. The dusty roads leading to her small house were lined with sun-scorched trees and the occasional barking dog. When he arrived, sweat dripped down his temple, but relief washed over him at the sight of Tango frisking around Pacha in the yard. Even from a distance, he could see how much the pup had grown. His legs looked sturdier, and his ears stood proudly upright. Each wag of that little tail seemed to radiate pure excitement. Camilla emerged from the house, beaming. She ushered Jonas onto the porch and handed him a glass of cold lemonade. Between Pacha's playful nudges and Tango's relentless attempts to climb onto Jonas's lap, the scene felt almost idyllic, yet a quiet tension tugged at him. He listened politely as Camilla described Tango's progress. The puppy was eating well, sleeping calmly, and even learning basic commands. But she also mentioned her next rescue case was due to arrive soon. A litter of abandoned kittens needed urgent fostering. Her house, she reminded him gently, couldn't handle so many animals indefinitely. Jonas understood the subtext. The time for finding Tango's permanent home was running out. That night, after returning to his cramped apartment, Jonas couldn't sleep. He kept picturing Tango's wagging tail, that hopeful gaze whenever Jonas spoke. Searching online, he looked at countless ads for cheap rooms or shared housing that might accept pets. Most places were either too expensive or had strict no-pets policies. Frustration built as each result seemed like another dead end. Just when he considered turning off his phone, he noticed a small classified "room for rent, pets welcome," accompanied by a phone number. Without letting himself overthink, Jonas dialed the number. A sleepy voice answered, and Jonas found himself rushing to explain his situation. A stable job, reliable references, and yes, a dog he intended to adopt permanently. After a moment of silence, the voice, who introduced himself as Roberto, told Jonas to come by the next morning for a viewing. Jonas barely slept that night. Images of Tango kept filling his thoughts, mingled with the fear that this new place might be too good to be true. Still, the possibility lifted his mood, offering him a glimmer of hope he hadn't felt in months. The next day, Jonas left the construction site early, hopped on 2 buses, and navigated a maze of side streets to reach the address Roberto had provided. It was a single-story brick building with a small fenced yard, a line of potted plants decorating the porch. When Jonas knocked on the door, a tall, wiry man with salt and pepper hair answered. This was Roberto. His eyes, though tired, radiated a quiet kindness. Inside, Jonas found a modest but clean space, a living room with old furniture, a tiny kitchen, and a spare bedroom. It was nothing fancy, yet it felt welcoming. "Your dog," Roberto began, leading Jonas to the fenced backyard, "will have space here. There's a decent bit of grass, and I don't mind if you build a small doghouse. I used to have a German Shepherd myself. Wonderful breed, smart, loyal, you name it." Hearing that was a relief to Jonas, who'd been bracing himself for the usual skeptical remarks. Instead, Roberto's eyes lit up with genuine fondness as he spoke about his late shepherd, Nina. As they shook hands on the porch, Jonas felt something shift inside him. Maybe, just maybe, a stable life with Tango was possible. Elated, Jonas called Camilla to share the good news. They agreed he'd come by on the weekend to pick up Tango. Over the next few days, Jonas counted the hours until Saturday. In preparation, he'd borrowed a friend's car to transport the pup safely, and he'd saved enough money for basic supplies, a small bed, a bag of puppy food, and chew toys. His excitement warred with nervousness. He kept double-checking with Roberto, making sure the arrangement would stick. But each time, Roberto assured him that he looked forward to having another German Shepherd around, if only to remind him of Nina. On Saturday morning, Jonas rose before sunrise. He stopped by a local bakery, buying fresh bread and coffee as a gesture of gratitude for Camilla. Then he drove across the city, heart pounding with anticipation. Outside Camilla's gate, he heard excited barks from Pacha and a higher-pitched one that had to be Tango. The moment he stepped into the yard, Tango rushed at him, tail wagging so intensely that his entire body quivered with joy. Jonas knelt, letting the pup place small paws on his thighs, and for a second he thought Tango might burst with happiness right there. Camilla emerged, smiling widely at the reunion. "He's been waiting for you since sunrise," she teased. Jonas felt a lump in his throat, overwhelmed by how much the pup seemed to trust him. After chatting a while, Camilla helped him load Tango's blanket, toys, and leftover supplies into the car. Just before Jonas climbed into the driver's seat, Camilla put a hand on his arm. "Take care of him, okay? He's special." A glimmer in her eye hinted there was more to the statement than mere affection. "I will," Jonas promised, giving her a grateful nod. The drive to Roberto's felt surreal. Tango lay curled in the passenger seat, occasionally peeking out the window at passing cars. Each time Jonas glanced over, the puppy offered a reassuring gaze, as if to say he trusted Jonas completely. Upon arriving, Roberto greeted them warmly, pointing out that he'd already prepared a small corner of the yard for Tango, complete with a shaded canopy. As Jonas led the puppy to his new space, he had to fight back tears. It wasn't lavish, but it was safe, and it was theirs to share. For the first time in ages, Jonas felt like he had a real home. That evening, after Tango had dozed off in his new bed, Roberto pulled Jonas aside with a somber expression. He explained that, years ago, his own German Shepherd had saved him from a house fire, alerting him just in time to escape. Ever since Nina's passing, he'd found solace in helping others care for their dogs. But there was more. Roberto had once worked with police K9 units and recognized something unusual in Tango's demeanor, an alertness and quickness to learn that hinted at a hidden potential. Jonas's spine tingled. Could this small, rescued puppy be destined for something far greater than an ordinary life? Indeed. The day after Roberto revealed his hunch about Tango's potential, Jonas woke up early. He felt a slight tremor of excitement that he couldn't fully explain. The puppy had been a street stray mere weeks ago, yet even in that short span, Tango had displayed a quick mind and unwavering loyalty that Jonas found remarkable. Meanwhile, the possibility of special training lingered in his thoughts. Could Tango really do more than just be a companion? It all started innocently enough. Jonas stepped into the yard with a squeaky toy shaped like a small dumbbell, figuring they'd play fetch for a few minutes before he headed off to work. Tango, tail wagging like a propeller, darted from one patch of grass to another, stopping whenever Jonas called his name. Jonas held the toy high overhead, then launched it across the yard. With startling speed, Tango dashed after it, instincts kicking in as if some ancestral memory guided his paws. He clamped onto the toy and raced back, ears flopping in excitement, presenting it at Jonas's feet with a satisfied bark. They repeated the game a few times. Each time, Tango watched carefully for Jonas's throw, never breaking eye contact until the toy soared. Then he sprang forward, muscles coiling as he bounded over small obstacles, never losing track of the squeaking dumbbell. Jonas found himself grinning. For a puppy, Tango showcased extraordinary focus. Finally, panting from the effort, the pup collapsed at Jonas's feet, tail still beating a happy rhythm against the grass. From the porch, Roberto watched, arms crossed. "He's a natural," he remarked. "I wouldn't be surprised if that pup could be trained to do advanced tasks. Shepherds have a long history of working in law enforcement, search and rescue, things like that." He descended the steps, hunching beside Tango, offering a gentle pat. "All dogs are special, but certain ones have an extra spark. I see it in his eyes." Jonas listened intently, remembering how Roberto had mentioned his years in the K-9 unit. A flurry of doubts crossed his mind. He could barely afford rent, let alone fancy training classes. Would it even be fair to push Tango into something so structured if Jonas himself was already juggling financial pressure? Still, the notion tugged at him, planting a seed of curiosity he couldn't ignore. That evening, Jonas found himself searching online for local dog training facilities. Most were pricey, the kind that catered to well-to-do clients who saw specialized training as a luxury. Yet Jonas's construction salary wouldn't stretch that far. A smaller, more humble listing caught his eye. A volunteer-run program at the community center, focused on basic obedience and socialization. It wasn't K-9 level training, but it might be a start. Without hesitation, Jonas scribbled down the address. The next afternoon, the two took a bus across town. Tango perched on Jonas's lap, garnering smiles from fellow passengers with his bright eyes and calm demeanor. At the community center, they were greeted by a friendly instructor named Marla. Middle-aged and warm-spirited, she wore a faded t-shirt with the center's logo emblazoned across it. Her brown curls escaped the edges of a loose ponytail, and when she spoke, she had a musical lilt to her voice that put Jonas at ease. Marla immediately bent down to Tango's level. "Well, hello there, handsome," she cooed, letting the pup sniff her open palm. "Jonas, you say he's a rescue?" "Yes," Jonas replied, pride sneaking into his tone. "Found him on the street, starving and alone. He's still young, maybe 3 or 4 months at most, but he's sharp. He picks up cues fast." Marla nodded. "He's definitely got that shepherd focus. Let's see how he does around other dogs." She led them to a fenced courtyard where half a dozen people practiced loose-leash walking and recalled drills with their dogs. A few canines barked in greeting, but Tango barely flinched. Instead, he surveyed the scene, ears erect as if sizing up potential new friends. Over the next hour, Marla guided Jonas through basic commands: sit, stay, come, down. Tango performed surprisingly well for a first-timer, responding more attentively than some older dogs in the class. Whenever Jonas gave the correct hand signal, the pup's ears twitched and he followed with minimal hesitation. By the end of the session, Marla was shaking her head with a smile. "I almost never say this, but I think you've got a prodigy on your hands," she joked, pressing a pamphlet into Jonas's grip. "Keep working with him at home. Bring him back next week." Jonas left the community center, brimming with excitement he could barely contain. All his life he'd labored in low-paying jobs, drifting from one cramped apartment to another, never feeling like he had a real direction. Now he walked down the sidewalk with Tango trotting proudly at his side, as if they were forging a path together. A wave of gratitude hit him. For once he was not alone in his struggles. He had a bright-eyed partner, eager to learn and grow by his side. On the commute home, Tango rested his chin on Jonas's knee, dozing off in the rumble of the city bus. Jonas stared out the window, thinking about how random it was that a neglected puppy on a hot sidewalk had opened a door to new possibilities. That sense of meaning and companionship had been missing for far too long. He knew challenges lay ahead, financial worries, the tension with Okada, and all the complexities of life, but he felt stronger facing them now. Back at the house, Roberto greeted them with a grin. "So, how did it go?" he asked, pouring 2 glasses of water. Jonas recounted the day's lessons. Marla said Tango's got an unusual aptitude, especially for his age. He's definitely not the average pup. "I could have told you that," Roberto replied with a chuckle. Then, more seriously, he added, "Jonas, I see how your eyes light up when you talk about that dog. Maybe you found something worth investing in, even if it's not easy. Trust me, you won't regret it." A pang of doubt struck Jonas. "But I can't exactly afford specialized training. Even beyond that, I have no clue how to juggle everything." He thought about the rent, groceries, the demands at work. "I barely make ends meet." Roberto clapped him on the shoulder. "If Tango's as talented as you say, maybe there are programs or scholarships. Police forces or search and rescue groups sometimes sponsor dog and handler teams, particularly for promising German shepherds. Or maybe you find a local group that trains therapy dogs. Just don't close doors before you've even knocked." Over the next few weeks, Jonas immersed himself in everything Marla's community center had to offer, from group obedience classes to dog social events in the local park. Tango's progress was remarkable. He swiftly mastered the usual commands: sit, stay, roll over, and even learned to navigate small agility obstacles like tunnels and low hurdles. Other dog owners looked on with envy, jokingly calling him the overachiever. But Jonas suspected that Tango's early hardship had instilled a strong survival instinct. The puppy was eager to please, keenly aware of moods, always scanning the environment. Not all was smooth sailing, though. One evening, Jonas came home from a brutally long day at the construction site to find his phone flooded with missed calls. Panicked, he checked the messages. Several were from Camilla. Her voice sounded frantic. "Jonas, I heard from a coworker that your old landlord, Mr. Okada, is going around asking about you. He claims you owe him money for damages." Another message followed. "Just be careful, Jonas. I've heard rumors he might show up at your new place." Jonas felt his stomach knot. He wasn't aware of any damages, but Okada's temper was notorious. He took a deep breath, reminding himself that he now had a stable rental agreement with Roberto, who wouldn't be easily intimidated. Sure enough, 3 days later, Jonas returned to an awkward scene in the front yard. Okada standing at the fence, vigorously gesturing at Roberto. Tango, sensing tension, stood between them, posture stiff, letting out a low growl. When Jonas approached, Okada's face twisted in anger. "You owe me for that hole in the wall," he spat, eyes wild. "And you can't hide your dog from me. I'll get my money one way or another." "I don't owe you anything," Jonas said calmly, though his heart thumped with uncertainty. He glanced at Roberto, who stood like a statue, arms folded, unimpressed by Okada's rant. "You kept my security deposit," Jonas continued, voice measured. "That should cover any repairs. There was never a hole in the wall." Okada snorted. "We'll see what the courts say." He jabbed a finger at Jonas, then at Tango. "You'll regret crossing me, you hear?" Despite the intimidation, Jonas felt a flicker of courage. He wasn't alone, after all. Tango remained at his side, and Roberto had already shown how fiercely loyal he could be. Okada, fuming, stormed off, muttering threats under his breath. Jonas exhaled shakily. If Okada truly escalated this, it could mean legal entanglements. But Roberto laid a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Don't fret. I've dealt with men like him. Next time he shows up, we'll be ready." Later that night, after dinner, Jonas sat on the porch with Tango curled at his feet. He stared into the dark sky, the hum of distant traffic mingling with the chirping of night insects. A mixture of worry and resolve churned in his mind. All he wanted was to move on from that past, focus on building a new life with Tango. Yet it seemed Okada wasn't going to let things go so easily. Memories of being threatened by the landlord, feeling powerless, stirred up old anxieties. Still, as Tango shifted and rested his head on Jonas's foot, Jonas realized how far they'd come. A few months before, the puppy could barely stand. Now he sprinted through agility courses and impressed seasoned dog trainers. Jonas was also different, a man who, for the first time, felt anchored to something real. The quiet presence of that furry companion offered more comfort than any reassurance from friends or co-workers ever had. Over the next few days, Jonas tried to brush off Okada's threats, immersing himself in daily routines, work, dog training, study. But an undercurrent of tension remained. Late one evening, as Jonas was about to turn in, Roberto brought out 2 cups of tea and joined him in the living room. "I've been thinking," Roberto said, eyes flicking toward Tango dozing under the coffee table. "If you're up for it, I could teach you some of what I learned in the K9 unit. Not official police training, of course, but enough to sharpen Tango's instincts and keep him mentally stimulated." Jonas couldn't hide his excitement. "Really? You'd do that?" "Of course. He's got the drive and you have the dedication. Who knows where it might lead?" Roberto's voice dropped slightly. "Also, with Okada prowling around, a well-trained dog can be a strong deterrent, just in case." Jonas nodded, heart thrumming with a curious blend of anticipation and apprehension. Okada, reappearing, the possibility of advanced training, the uncertain path ahead. So many variables pressed against him. Yet the loyalty shining in Tango's eyes every morning convinced Jonas it was worth the effort. In a life that had often felt aimless, he'd finally discovered something worth fighting for. And if that meant squaring off against old fears, so be it. Over the next few evenings, Jonas and Roberto fell into a steady routine. After dinner, they cleared the living room to create an open area, pushing aside a small table and sofa. Tango would sit alert in the corner, tail wagging, as Roberto explained the fundamentals of K9 work. While they couldn't replicate police training exactly, Roberto improvised drills that tested Tango's discipline. They practiced simple tasks like retrieving specific objects, responding to subtle hand signals, and staying vigilant to the environment. Jonas watched in awe as Tango displayed a focus that seemed beyond his few months of age. Meanwhile, outside, tension still simmered. Sometimes Jonas felt an undercurrent of anxiety every time he heard footsteps in the street. Okada's threats still lingered, making him worry about potential confrontations. Yet each day that passed without incident allowed Jonas to breathe a bit easier. He wanted to focus on the progress Tango was making under Roberto's guidance. While the puppy still had the playful energy of youth, he already showed an uncanny ability to differentiate between friendly visitors and unknown presences. One evening, a delivery driver arrived unexpectedly, and Tango alerted Jonas by barking twice, once for attention and once with a deeper tone of warning. Tango's cues became a subtle form of security for the household. Even Roberto, usually unflappable, admitted he slept better knowing the puppy was on guard. In time, Jonas learned that the most critical lesson was consistency. Whether practicing a sit-stay or more complex drills, Tango advanced fastest when Jonas repeated the same commands with the same tone. The pup thrived under clear expectations. As the nights passed, Jonas caught himself smiling whenever Tango trotted after him, eager for the next lesson. Their bond had deepened into something almost uncanny, like two halves of a single unit forging trust through shared devotion. After a month of home training, Roberto suggested they test Tango's skills in a more challenging environment. He recommended a weekend outing to a nearby park, known for its open fields and occasional canine competitions. Although Jonas felt nervous, the idea thrilled him. Early Saturday morning, they loaded Tango into Roberto's old pickup and drove out. Upon arrival, they saw dozens of dogs practicing agility, obedience, and search drills. Even from a distance, the excitement was palpable. Tango seemed captivated, ears flicking toward every whistle or cheering spectator, as if he recognized this was another step in his remarkable journey. A friendly organizer spotted Roberto and approached, greeting him by name. Jonas listened with curiosity as they exchanged stories of past K9 trials. The organizer then eyed Tango with professional interest. "He looks promising," she commented, offering her hand for the dog to sniff. "Would you like to participate in a short demonstration? Nothing official, just some fun tasks." Roberto deferred to Jonas, who nodded. Within minutes, they found themselves on a makeshift obstacle course, guiding Tango over low jumps, weaving between cones, and ending with a basic recall under mild distractions. The puppy tackled each task with focused zeal. Spectators gathered, clapping in delight as Tango sprinted back to Jonas, ignoring a squeaky toy thrown nearby. Another dog, older and more advanced, performed next. But even that handler paused to admire Tango's grace. Jonas felt a rush of pride he could scarcely contain. The months of quiet dedication, the daily training in Roberto's living room, and the bond formed under adversity had culminated in this moment of public recognition. By the time they left the park, more than one person suggested that Jonas enroll Tango in a formal program. Yet cost remained a roadblock, as always, lurking in Jonas's mind. On the drive back, Roberto brought up the idea again. "Maybe we can find a sponsorship," he said, tapping the steering wheel thoughtfully. Police departments or private security firms sometimes fund the training of gifted dogs, especially German Shepherds. If the dog excels, they might want him for professional service. Jonas's heart sank. The idea of giving Tango away was unthinkable, even if it meant guaranteed top-level instruction. He shook his head, explaining that he couldn't part with the pup after all they'd been through. Roberto simply nodded. "Then we keep searching for another way. I'm sure it'll turn up." They returned home to find a note pinned on the fence, an envelope with Jonas's name scrawled in thick letters. Inside, a single piece of paper read, "Pay your debts or else." No signature, but Jonas didn't need one to recognize Okada's intimidation tactics. A chill ran through him. Fear mixed with anger at this intrusion. Roberto examined the note and advised Jonas to document everything. "If he escalates, we'll have proof of harassment," Roberto said, urging calm. Yet Jonas slept fitfully that night, dreaming of half-lit hallways where Okada's shadow lurked. Only Tango's soft, rhythmic breathing offered any sense of safety. In the mornings that followed, Jonas poured himself into both work and Tango's training, determined not to let fear rule his life. Each morning before dawn, they practiced short sessions in the backyard. Roberto introduced hide-and-seek style drills, hiding items behind planters or within the old storage shed. Tango excelled, sniffing out the objects with uncanny efficiency. Though officially just basic enrichment, Jonas sensed these exercises sharpened Tango's mind daily, and in that quiet hour, before the city awoke, a calm resolve settled over Jonas. Whatever Okada attempted, Jonas wouldn't surrender the progress they'd built piece by piece. One Thursday, as Jonas was hauling bricks at the construction site, Camilla called with unexpected news. A local philanthropic foundation offered grants for promising service animal training. She'd found it while browsing an online forum devoted to rescue dogs. The application deadline was in 2 weeks, but the foundation required evidence of basic skills and a letter of recommendation from a certified trainer. Jonas's heart pounded. He realized this could be the break he needed to take Tango's abilities to the next level without sacrificing ownership. All he had to do was prove how capable Tango was, and do it quickly. That evening, Jonas shared the news with Roberto, who immediately called in a favor from an old friend. Marla, the community center trainer, happened to hold a certification recognized by the foundation. If she agreed to write a recommendation, Jonas would only need to demonstrate Tango's skill set. Overjoyed, Jonas invited Marla over for a weekend training session. When she arrived, Tango performed each command flawlessly, from off-leash heel work to retrieving concealed objects. Marla seemed genuinely impressed. "I've seen dogs with half his talent graduate from official courses," she remarked, promising to draft the letter as soon as possible. For a moment, everything seemed hopeful. The house felt alive with the promise of a bright future for both Jonas and Tango. But that optimism cracked the following Tuesday when Jonas returned from work to find the fence gate unlatched. Inside the yard, Tango was barking frantically, pacing by the door. The puppy's water bowl lay overturned, and a few scattered footprints in the dirt suggested someone had intruded. When Jonas peeked inside, he saw a note taped to the window. "This isn't over." Fear shot through him. Roberto was out running errands, leaving only Tango to witness the trespass. Hands trembling, Jonas bolted the gate and stepped inside, scanning for forced entry. Nothing was stolen, but the message was clear. Okada meant to rattle him. Tango pressed close, whining softly. Jonas felt his fear transform into resolve. He had too much at stake: the grant, Tango's future, and their hard-won home. That night, he filed a police report, attaching photos of footprints in the note. As he moved through official channels, one conviction burned in his mind. He would protect Tango no matter what. And soon, they would prove how strong their bond truly was. In the days that followed the second break-in, Jonas found himself jumping at every unexpected sound. A car door slamming, a passing motorbike, even the wind rattling the fence. He'd installed heavier locks and added a makeshift security camera by the porch, a battered webcam connected to an old laptop, but the fear lingered. Roberto tried to reassure him by reminding him of the police report. Camilla checked in constantly, offering moral support, while Marla urged Jonas to stay focused on the upcoming demonstration for the philanthropic foundation. Despite everything, Tango sensed his mood. The pup often nestled against him, whining softly whenever Jonas paced the living room at odd hours. More than once, Jonas wondered if training Tango for advanced security might be the only way to protect themselves from Okada's looming threat. One morning, Roberto proposed a solution. He had an acquaintance named Felipe, a private security consultant who occasionally evaluated promising dogs for official programs. Though Jonas was reluctant, Roberto saw it as a chance for added resources and protective measures. If Felipe declared that Tango had advanced capabilities, the philanthropic foundation might be more inclined to approve the grant swiftly. Jonas wrestled with the idea of letting a stranger test Tango's skills, but he agreed. A thorough evaluation, he reasoned, could only help their cause. The plan was set for the upcoming weekend, in the same park where Tango had dazzled spectators with his agility. Secretly, Jonas hoped for a definitive sign that they were on the right path, forging ahead no matter what shadows lurked in Okada's wake. Saturday arrived under an overcast sky. Jonas felt an odd mixture of excitement and dread as they loaded a small duffel bag into Roberto's truck. Tango waited patiently in the back seat, ears perked, picking up on the tension. Upon reaching the park, they found Felipe, broad-shouldered with sharp eyes that reminded Jonas of a hawk, waiting near a makeshift training area. After greetings, Felipe knelt and studied Tango with a professional calm, running his hands along the pup's back, testing reflexes. He gave a nod as though acknowledging some unspoken potential. Jonas swallowed hard, remembering how vulnerable Tango had once been. Now, the puppy stood proud, ready for whatever test lay ahead. Roberto offered a small, encouraging smile. "You got this," he whispered, placing a reassuring hand on Jonas's shoulder. Felipe began with a series of simple commands, barking them out in a crisp tone. Heel, stay, drop. Tango responded smoothly, though he glanced at Jonas for confirmation. Then came trickier maneuvers, like ignoring a high-value treat tossed nearby or calmly standing amid loud noises. Roberto rattled an old metal bucket, while Felipe clapped his hands sharply. Tango flattened his ears but stayed in position, eyes locked on Jonas. Onlookers paused, curious about this intense session. Soon Felipe introduced a decoy scenario. He donned a padded sleeve and feigned a sudden approach, raising his arm in a threatening posture. Jonas's pulse spiked. Yet Tango responded exactly as trained, alert bark, protective stance, waiting for Jonas's signal. A hint of pride gleamed in Felipe's expression, though he kept it brief. When the evaluation ended, Felipe stepped aside with Roberto and Jonas, removing the padded sleeve and wiping sweat from his brow. "He's raw but exceptional," the consultant said. "His drive is high and he's clearly bonded to you, Jonas. That's good for a security dog, but it also means he'll rely heavily on your cues. If you keep training seriously, he could do advanced detection or personal protection." Jonas felt relief flooding his chest. This wasn't just speculation. Felipe's credentials were legitimate, and so were his conclusions. The Philanthropic Foundation's demonstration was scheduled for next week, and a glowing endorsement from Felipe might tip the scales in their favor. Tango, panting happily, seemed oblivious to the gravity of the moment. He just wagged his tail, as though proud to have pleased them. That afternoon, they strolled through the park, letting Tango decompress. Camilla showed up unexpectedly, having heard about the evaluation. She grinned from ear to ear upon seeing Tango trot confidently between Jonas and Roberto. "Look at him now," she said, reminiscing about the frail pup she'd fostered. "It's like he's a different dog." Jonas chuckled. "In a way, he is. He's found purpose." A short distance away, a group of children played with a frisbee, and Tango perked up at the sight, ears swiveling in curiosity. Jonas crouched, holding Tango back gently. The pup's energy crackled, as if he longed to chase the spinning disc. Maybe, Jonas mused, Tango's path would include bringing joy instead of just security. For the moment, though, there was no time to decide. The Foundation demonstration loomed. Early Monday morning, Jonas typed out the final portion of the grant application, referencing Felipe's evaluation and Marla's letter of recommendation. He attached photos of Tango's progress, a collage of the once skinny puppy, now bounding over agility jumps or sitting calmly amid crowds. Roberto proofread each section, ensuring every detail was correct. They submitted it electronically, hearts pounding, fully aware that countless applicants competed for the same limited funds. After hitting send, Jonas felt both excitement and dread. He'd done everything possible. Now, all that remained was waiting. Tango, as though sensing the tension, rested his muzzle on Jonas's lap, exhaling a warm breath. "We'll know soon, buddy," Jonas whispered, ruffling the pup's ears. "One way or another, we'll figure it out." Meanwhile, Okada's threats hadn't ceased. Though he no longer left notes, a neighbor spotted him lurking near the property line 2 nights prior, Jonas tried to brush off the sightings, focusing on the hope of the grant. Nonetheless, he double-checked the locks each night. One evening, a police officer dropped by to ask routine follow-up questions about the trespassing complaint. Jonas explained everything calmly, but his nerves were frayed. The officer advised him to remain vigilant and keep filing reports if any new incidents occurred. After the officer left, Tango stood by the door, watching the front gate with quiet intensity. Jonas gently stroked the pup's back, finding strength in that unwavering presence. He reminded himself that no matter the outcome, they'd endured too much to back down now. The foundation demonstration took place that Thursday. At dawn, Jonas hurriedly fed Tango, then hopped into Roberto's truck, heading downtown to the community center's larger annex building. The center's auditorium had been repurposed for the event, with a small stage and demonstration area at the front. A panel of 3 judges, representing philanthropic donors, sat behind a table, clipboards in hand. Marla was there, along with a handful of other aspiring recipients, therapy dog trainers, rescue organizations, even a specialized service dog program for veterans. Jonas's stomach churned with nerves as he watched the first presentation. Each group had a unique story, and the competition felt intense. Then Marla signaled it was their turn. Jonas's heart hammered. Bending down, he murmured into Tango's ear, "We've got this, right?" Stepping onto the small stage, Jonas briefly introduced himself, explaining how Tango had been rescued, starved, and alone, and how their journey led them here. Roberto stood off to the side, giving moral support. Marla narrated while Jonas guided Tango through a series of commands: sit, stay, heel, and come, both on and off leash. The panel watched intently, scribbling notes. Then came a short demonstration of detection. Roberto hid a small satchel containing a harmless scented marker behind a fold in the auditorium curtains. Tango sniffed the air, head bobbing, tail swishing. Within seconds, he padded straight to the concealed item, pawing at the fabric. Gasps rose from the audience. Finally, Jonas signaled a controlled protection scenario. Roberto feigned a threat, stepping forward with a menacing stance. Tango barked, standing protectively before Jonas, but withheld any snap of aggression until Jonas gave a verbal release. The applause that followed felt surreal. Jonas could hardly believe the transformation they'd showcased in just months. As they walked off stage, tears of gratitude stung his eyes. The judges asked for final remarks, and Jonas said simply, "This dog saved me as much as I saved him. I hope we can keep paying that gift forward." With the demonstration complete, they retreated to the backstage area, waiting for an outcome that could change both their futures forever. Jonas leaned against the backstage wall, running a shaky hand through his hair. The adrenaline rush of performing in front of the philanthropic panel left him winded, as if he'd raced for miles at top speed. Tango, still brimming with eagerness, paced nearby, sniffing chairs and boxes stacked against the auditorium's rear exit. Every minute that passed without a verdict felt like an eternity, yet Jonas tried to keep calm by reminding himself how well Tango had performed. Nearby, Marla shared a whispered conversation with Roberto, likely strategizing on how to handle next steps if the outcome wasn't favorable. Across the hallway, other applicants also waited, some with therapy dogs at their feet, others holding clipboards brimming with statistics and plans. Despite the tension, Jonas couldn't suppress a faint smile as he replayed in his mind how Tango had nailed the detection exercise. That one portion, the quick pivot and alert bark to pinpoint the hidden item, had caused the audience to murmur with admiration. For a moment, he allowed himself to hope. Maybe the judges saw the same spark in Tango that everyone else had begun to notice. It wasn't just about the money. This grant would validate all the effort, giving them a chance to expand Tango's training beyond backyard drills. Jonas exhaled slowly, trying to quell the swirl of emotions in his chest. Finally, a polite-faced coordinator appeared from the other side of the curtain, clipboard in hand. "They've reached a decision," she announced softly, scanning the group. "We'll be calling each applicant in one by one. Please wait here until your name is called." With that, she whisked away. Jonas exchanged glances with Roberto and Marla, then settled on a wooden crate, tangling his fingers in Tango's fur for reassurance. The pup seemed entirely untroubled, leaning into Jonas's touch. It was as if Tango, braver than any of them, knew no reason to fret. One by one, names were called, and people disappeared through the curtain. Some emerged with relieved smiles, others with resigned shrugs. Jonas's stomach churned each time footsteps approached, only to pass him by. Then at last, the coordinator's voice echoed once more. "Jonas, Tango, please come in." Jonas gulped, standing too quickly and almost tripping on a loose cable. Roberto squeezed his shoulder. "Good luck, kid," he said, that paternal warmth always present. "Remember, no matter what they decide, you two have come a long way." Jonas nodded, and with Tango at his heel, he slipped through the curtain. The auditorium's main stage felt oddly large now that the seats were mostly empty. Only the three judges remained, each flipping through papers and glancing up as Jonas approached. Tango sat on command, tail giving a single wag. The center judge, a woman with short silver hair, spoke first. "We were impressed," she began, offering a small smile. "German Shepherds are a popular breed for service, but your dog demonstrates unusual composure for his age. We also appreciated the personal story of rescue and rehabilitation." Jonas's pulse quickened. The judge's expression was neither stern nor overly enthusiastic, just measured as though she was used to delivering a mix of good and bad news. Another judge, a younger man with thick-rimmed glasses, leaned forward. "We had many strong candidates. In particular, the therapy dog programs for local retirement homes are quite compelling. Competition for funding is steep." Jonas braced himself, readying for disappointment. "However," the man continued, "we believe your project, focusing on advanced obedience and potential detection skills, could serve an underserved area in public safety and personal protection. It's not purely law enforcement. It's also about bridging the gap between rescue animals and specialized training." The third judge, silent until now, cleared her throat. "With that in mind, we've decided to grant you partial funding. It's not the full award you requested, but it's enough to cover specialized courses and some equipment expenses. We encourage you to partner with a recognized training academy to fully unlock your dog's potential." Jonas felt a rush of relief so powerful it made his hands tremble. Tango picked up on his excitement, standing to place his front paws gently on Jonas's leg. Only partial funding, yes, but still a victory. Enough to move forward. They had done it. "Thank you," Jonas managed, his voice rough with emotion. "You won't regret this." The silver-haired judge nodded, handing him a short stack of documents. "We'll arrange a follow-up in a few weeks. Please be prepared with more detailed training plans." Jonas thanked them again, then guided Tango off stage. Roberto and Marla were waiting, their eyes questioning. Jonas broke into a wide grin. "They're giving us partial funding," he exclaimed. A celebratory whoop from Roberto followed, echoed by Marla's delighted laughter. Tango barked once as though to say, "Of course we succeeded." With the demonstration complete and the grant secured, they returned home in a sort of triumphant haze. That evening, Roberto insisted on ordering pizza to celebrate. As they sat on the porch under the glow of a single overhead light, Tango curled up at Jonas's feet, contentedly gnawing on a slice of crust Jonas had sneaked him. The conversation buzzed with talk of official training academies, advanced classes, and maybe even forging a new path for other rescue dogs. Roberto teased Jonas about soon being a handler extraordinaire, while Marla pointed out local training schools that had decent reputations and flexible schedules. Yet lurking beneath the surface of that joy was the nagging concern about Okada. The partial funding eased some money worries, but Jonas still had to remain vigilant. The last note pinned on the fence had shown Okada wouldn't simply disappear. Jonas resolved to be on guard. If the philanthropic foundation believed in Tango, then Jonas had to believe in their future. He clung to that optimism like a life raft. In the following days, Jonas and Tango set out early each morning to practice. With Roberto's help, they mapped out more elaborate drills in the backyard, turning piles of old tires into agility obstacles and rigging up a tug rope for controlled bite work. Though Tango was still young, Roberto taught Jonas how to safely introduce protective exercises, emphasizing that control and trust mattered more than brute force. Even so, Jonas was amazed by Tango's instincts. The dog's eyes shone with alert intensity whenever a command was given. It was as though Tango had been born for this. Within a week, the Philanthropic Foundation's partial grant funds arrived electronically. Jonas nearly cried when he saw the deposit in his account. It wasn't enough to quit his construction job, nor did it suddenly solve all his financial troubles, but it was a springboard. He went online and enrolled Tango in a respected local training center specializing in advanced obedience. Their rates were normally steep, but after hearing the pup's backstory and learning about the foundation's endorsement, the facility allowed Jonas a small discount. Classes were set to begin the following month. Amid these preparations, Okada remained eerily silent. No new notes, no sightings reported by neighbors. Part of Jonas feared it was the calm before the storm, but he tried to trust that maybe, somehow, the conflict had run its course. Then, one Sunday afternoon while Jonas was out buying groceries, Roberto called him. "You need to get home," the older man said, voice tight with urgency. "The police are here. Something happened." Jonas felt his stomach drop. Racing back, balancing the bags precariously, he found 2 patrol cars parked outside, blue lights pulsing. Tango was in the yard, barking furiously at the sight of uniformed officers. An officer approached Jonas, asking if he recognized a battered old sedan parked half a block away. Jonas shook his head, confusion roiling in his mind. Roberto appeared at his side, explaining that a neighbor had seen a man lurking near Jonas's gate, carrying what appeared to be a crowbar. When spotted, the intruder fled, but not before dropping an envelope near the fence. The neighbor called the cops immediately, suspecting a burglary attempt. Fear flared in Jonas's chest, certain it had to be Okada. Then the officer revealed something chilling. The man's license plate, though partially obscured, matched a number registered to an entirely different owner. It might be a stolen car, or worse, someone working on Okada's behalf. They examined the envelope. It contained no note this time, just a single torn photograph of Jonas outside his old apartment. The message was clear enough. Someone was watching. Jonas felt the blood drain from his face. He told the officer about his history with Okada, the threats, the trespassing incidents. The officer took meticulous notes, advising Jonas to consider a restraining order if he had enough evidence. Jonas wasn't sure if he did, yet the fact that they'd found a crowbar left him shaken. This was no longer about intimidation alone. It hinted at a potential break-in. Tango, upset by all the tension, paced around Jonas as he spoke with the police. Even though the presence of uniformed strangers normally wouldn't faze him, this commotion seemed to put him on edge, hackles raised. Roberto tried to soothe the dog, murmuring soft words of comfort, while Jonas answered the officer's final questions. After the patrol cars left, Jonas huddled inside with Roberto, going over a plan of action. "I'll install stronger motion sensors," Roberto said calmly, referencing a friend who specialized in security systems. Jonas nodded, numb. He felt torn between his newfound hope for the future and the dread that Okada, or whoever was working with him, wouldn't rest until they caused real harm. That night, Jonas barely slept, lying awake on the worn-out couch in the living room. Tango dozed nearby, occasionally lifting his head at the faintest noise. Jonas realized how precarious everything was. He couldn't allow fear to win. They'd come so far. From the day he scooped Tango off the scorching sidewalk to the moment they stood on stage, winning a partial grant that could change both their lives. If Okada wanted to sabotage that, Jonas resolved he'd be ready. Still, paranoia clung to him, every shadow in the yard seeming to shift under the moonlight. The next morning, as sun rays crept through the blinds, Jonas awoke to the comforting weight of Tango's head resting on his knee. It grounded him, easing the dread from the night. Let Okada come. Jonas refused to back down. He had a reason to fight now. An innocent dog that had already endured too much cruelty, a circle of allies who believed in them, and a future bright with possibilities. The city stirred outside, car engines revving, horns blaring, but Jonas felt a new steely resolve. He looked down at Tango, those intelligent eyes shining back, and whispered, "We're going to be all right." Early the next morning, Jonas woke on the couch with a start, the remnants of restless dreams dissolving into the pale light that seeped through the blinds. Tango lay beside him, tail thumping softly against the cushion as soon as Jonas stirred. The events of the past days weighed heavily, but a new determination pulsed through him. He had responsibilities now, not just to himself, but to the bright-eyed shepherd who seemed to trust him unconditionally. Stretching, Jonas rose and padded into the kitchen, where Roberto was already sipping coffee. The older man nodded a greeting, lines of worry visible on his brow. Though neither spoke at first, the presence of the half-installed security cameras around the windows testified to the tension they both felt. Jonas poured himself a cup, letting the aroma momentarily soothe his nerves. "I'm taking Tango to the advanced class after work," he said quietly. "It starts tonight. Maybe focusing on training will help distract me." Roberto sipped thoughtfully before answering. "Distraction is good, but don't ignore the reality. The police might need more details. Keep every piece of evidence safe. Photographs of footprints, that envelope, everything." Jonas nodded. He remembered how the officer had told him that a paper trail could be crucial if Okada, or whoever was behind these intrusions, decided to escalate. After Jonas left for his construction shift, Tango stayed behind, dozing in the sunny patch of the yard, occasionally lifting his head at distant noises. Roberto set about installing motion sensor lights around the perimeter. He also left a message with a friend who specialized in private security systems, hoping for a quick install of more robust cameras. If Okada planned another move, they intended to be ready. Meanwhile, Jonas found it nearly impossible to concentrate at work. The rhythmic pounding of hammers and hiss of welding torches provided background noise that usually helped him slip into a productive trance. But today, a prickle of unease crawled through his thoughts. He forced himself to focus, hauling bricks and mixing concrete, reminding himself that every hour earned helped fund Tango's training. A small part of him resented how precarious it all felt, how one landlord's vendetta threatened to unravel months of hard-won progress. Yet each time the frustration flared, Jonas pictured Tango bounding happily through an agility course, or nuzzling Jonas's hand when he felt anxious. That vision pushed him onward. By evening, Jonas rushed home to clean up, then set off for Tango's first advanced class at the new training facility. The building sat in a quiet industrial zone on the edge of town, looking more like a warehouse than a canine school. Yet inside, a spacious training floor stretched out, lined with cones, hurdles, and color-coded markers. The facility's manager, a tall woman named Tasha, greeted them warmly. After verifying Jonas's paperwork, and the partial grant sponsorship. She knelt to examine Tango's posture and responsiveness. A smile spread across her face. "Oh, I see why everyone's talking about him," she said, beckoning them to join a small group of 5 other dog handler pairs. That first session tested Tango's focus amid distractions. Loud squeakers, strobe lights, and even a mechanical device that simulated random pops of noise. Jonas was relieved to see that Tango, while slightly startled at first, stayed glued to his commands. They practiced swift sits, downs, and controlled leave-it drills. The trainer praised Tango's progress, pointing out that for such a young dog he showed remarkable resilience. Jonas beamed with pride, excitement fluttering in his chest. He recalled how the philanthropic panel had believed in them. Witnessing Tango's calm under stress reinforced that their faith wasn't misplaced. Once the class ended, Jonas lingered to chat with Tasha about next steps. She suggested they sign up for private lessons to accelerate Tango's development, especially if the goal was to refine detection or protection tasks. The cost made Jonas flinch, but Tasha assured him that partial scholarship options existed for rescue dogs with proven potential. She handed him a brochure for an upcoming workshop led by a retired police K-9 officer. "He'll be focusing on scenario-based training," Tasha explained. "It's intense, but I think Tango could handle it." Jonas took the pamphlet, feeling the familiar mix of excitement and worry over finances. Leaving the facility, he noticed night had fully descended on the industrial park. The overhead lights cast stark shadows. Tango sniffed the air, alert but calm. As Jonas unlocked his battered sedan, he felt someone watching. A flicker at the edge of his vision made him whirl around. Seeing no one, Jonas exhaled, reminding himself that fear could play tricks. He and Tango climbed into the car and set off, though Jonas's pulse hammered the entire drive home. By the time they reached the house, the tension had him gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles ached. Inside, Roberto was on the phone with the security specialist. Jonas overheard bits of the conversation. Yes, motion sensors, planning on hooking them up to a local alarm, some kind of recording to the cloud. The older man hung up, turning to Jonas with a tight-lipped smile. "We'll have better coverage soon. Meanwhile, a neighbor told me they saw a car idling down the street, no lights on. Don't want to assume the worst, but keep your guard up." Jonas shook his head, frustration swirling. "I hate living like this," he muttered, setting Tango's training bag down. "One day we're on top of the world, the next we're spooked by every car." Roberto came over and gave Jonas a reassuring pat on the back. "This isn't forever," he said gently. "Okada's hoping you'll crumble. Don't give him the satisfaction." Jonas nodded, kneeling to unclip Tango's leash. The pup licked his chin, tail wagging tentatively as if to say, "We're safe now." Jonas couldn't resist a small smile, and so the pattern continued for several days. Jonas spent his mornings at the construction site, evenings at the training facility, or practicing advanced drills in the backyard, always mindful of potential threats. One night, as Jonas studied training manuals, he heard Tango growl low by the back door. Flicking off the lamp, Jonas peered outside. Moonlight revealed nothing but shifting shadows among the bushes. Still, Tango's alert posture sent Jonas's heart pounding. He pressed his phone in his pocket, ready to call the police if any sign of intrusion appeared. But after minutes of waiting in silence, Tango relaxed. Whatever it was, it vanished into the darkness. Eventually, Jonas decided to speak to the local precinct again. This time he brought photos of the crowbar footprints and the license plate details. Though the officer on duty took notes, Jonas could see the resigned expression. With limited manpower, minor harassment cases wouldn't be top priority. "Just file a restraining order if you're certain it's your old landlord," the officer advised. Jonas sighed, uncertain whether that would stop a man so bent on vengeance. Despite the background unease, life pressed on. Tango's progress soared, impressing the trainers. At the advanced class, Tasha insisted the pup join the scenario-based workshop, where mock situations included searching a building for contraband or guiding Jonas through a simulated chaotic environment. The Philanthropic Foundation had also requested an update. Jonas sent them a short video montage of Tango skillfully weaving through cones and locating hidden objects, accompanied by a testimonial from Tasha herself. Their enthusiastic reply indicated they might consider more funding in the future. Jonas clung to that possibility like a lifeline, but then an incident one Thursday evening threatened to derail everything. Jonas arrived home to find the backyard gate slightly ajar, though it had been locked that morning. Inside the house, a single picture frame lay smashed on the floor, glass scattered across the rug. Nothing else was taken. The intrusion was targeted, meant to send a message. Tango dashed around, sniffing at corners, agitated by unfamiliar scents. Jonas's pulse hammered. Enough was enough. That night, with Roberto's help, Jonas decided to file for a protective order against Okada. Even if the man never set foot on the property again, Jonas wanted a paper trail that might deter him or at least hold him accountable if he returned. When Jonas arrived at the courthouse, he felt a twinge of dread. The sterile corridors, the quiet hush of administrative offices, it all evoked memories of old hardships. He filled out the necessary paperwork, describing how Okada had made threats, left ominous notes, possibly orchestrated break-ins. The clerk took the forms, instructing Jonas to wait for a scheduled hearing date. As Jonas left, he clenched his jaw, wishing there was a faster solution. But maybe the hearing would bring resolution. 2 days later, while Jonas was on the job site, his phone buzzed with an unknown number. He quickly stepped away from the clamor to answer, heart sinking when he heard Camilla's voice, strained with worry. "Jonas, Okada was at my place," she whispered. "He claimed I was hiding you. I told him you moved ages ago, but he wouldn't listen. Then he started talking about money you supposedly owe." Jonas felt a surge of guilt. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I never meant to drag you into this." Camilla paused, calming herself. "Hey, don't apologize. But be cautious. He seemed unhinged. I called the police, but he'd gone by the time they arrived." That evening, Jonas updated Roberto, who simply pressed his lips together in a grim line. "He's desperate," Roberto observed. "A cornered man will try anything. We need to stay one step ahead." Jonas tried to muster optimism. "We have that hearing in a couple of weeks. The protective order might help." Secretly, though, he fretted that a man with Okada's temper wouldn't be deterred by legal barriers. Despite the swirling uncertainty, Tango continued to thrive in his training. One cool morning, Jonas took the dog for an early run through the neighborhood. The sun barely kissed the rooftops as they jogged side by side, the crisp air fueling their lungs. For a brief span, Jonas forgot about Okada, forgot the looming hearing. It was just him and Tango forging forward in steady strides. Near the end of the route, they stopped to catch their breath. Tango nudged Jonas's hand, eyes bright, panting happily. Jonas bent down, pressing his forehead gently to the shepherd's muzzle. "No matter what happens," he whispered, "we keep going. You hear me?" The dog's answering lick felt like a pledge. In that simple moment, Jonas understood that fear could be undone by love, just as Tango's frailty had transformed into confidence through care and devotion. They headed home, the first warm rays of daylight illuminating the path ahead, a silent promise that for every shadow cast, a new light would rise. The air in the living room felt thick with expectation as Jonas and Roberto gathered over a small coffee table, pouring through legal documents in preparation for the upcoming protective order hearing. A detective's business card lay among the papers, along with grainy screenshots from the hastily installed security cameras. Tango dozed at Jonas's feet, but his ears twitched periodically as though he too sensed the tension filling the space. The hearing was just days away, And although Jonas wanted to believe a judge's decision might finally deter Okada, he couldn't shake the dread that the man's obsession ran too deep for any legal measure to truly contain it. "Your best bet is to remain calm and factual," Roberto advised, tapping a pen against the table. He'd been reading up on how to present evidence in small civil hearings. Show the judge the photographs, the notes, the police reports. Emphasize the pattern. If Okada doesn't attend, that might work in our favor. Jonas nodded, rifling through the stack of documents. "I wish I could just present Tango as a witness," he joked half-heartedly, though his smile was wan. "He's the one who's been home to see all the suspicious cars and strangers snooping around." Roberto grinned. "I doubt that would fly, but who knows? Stranger things have happened." His tone turned more serious as he studied Jonas's expression. "You holding up okay? You haven't been sleeping much." Jonas shrugged, suppressing a yawn. Late nights spent reviewing videos from the security cameras had become his norm. "I'll manage," he said. "Anyway, focusing on Tango's training helps. It's the one area where I feel in control." As if on cue, the puppy rose to stretch, then ambled over to Jonas's side, nuzzling his knee in silent support. In fact, Tango's progress continued to astound everyone at the training facility. The pup had breezed through advanced obedience milestones in record time, and Tasha was already introducing more demanding tasks typically reserved for older, more seasoned dogs. One morning, after an intense practice session of tracking scents hidden around the facility, Tasha cornered Jonas in the hallway. "You might consider some specialized trials," she suggested. "He's young, but his instincts are off the charts. If we can get the Philanthropic Foundation to back an official certification, Tango could become a top-tier search or detection dog." Jonas felt equal parts excitement and unease. His dream had simply been to give Tango a decent life, free from the harshness of the streets. Now people were talking about professional-level endeavors, tests, and championships. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "Things at home are complicated, but I'll think about it." Tasha nodded in understanding, reminding him that the door was always open if he chose to pursue such paths. That same week, a letter from the Philanthropic Foundation arrived. Jonas's heart pounded as he tore the envelope. They expressed continued interest in Tango's development and hinted at additional funds if the dog passed an advanced assessment in a few months. The letter felt like a beacon of light in a sea of shadows. Yet with Okada still lurking, Jonas wondered if he could balance a rigorous training regimen, full-time work, and a legal battle all at once. 2 days before the hearing, Jonas drove to the courthouse to deliver a final set of documents regarding Okada's harassment. Parking the car, he glanced at the passenger seat where Tango normally rode. Today, the pup had stayed home with Roberto, as dogs weren't allowed inside. Without Tango's steady presence, Jonas felt exposed, as though he'd left part of his armor behind. The courthouse hallways were as sterile as ever, a hushed realm of echoes and polished floors. He met briefly with a clerk, handed over updated photos of the break-in aftermath, then retreated to the sidewalk with a pounding headache. Outside, the sun glared off the pavement, intensifying his fatigue. Jonas felt a sudden itch between his shoulders, as though someone watched him from across the street. Pausing, he scanned rows of parked cars and bustling pedestrians. No one seemed to be paying special attention to him. Still, a stray memory of an idling sedan near Roberto's house nagged at him. Shaking off the unease, Jonas crossed the street to catch a bus back home, telling himself it was only nerves. That evening, he tried to unwind by running some quick recall exercises with Tango in the yard. The dog performed flawlessly, bounding across the grass to retrieve each object Jonas placed under a shrub or behind a corner of the shed. At last, Jonas crouched and praised Tango with thorough ear rubs. "Wish me luck tomorrow, buddy," he murmured. "Maybe after this hearing, we can finally breathe free." Tango licked his chin, tail waving in earnest agreement. The morning of the hearing arrived with a drizzling rain that blurred the neighborhood's outlines into a smear of gray. Jonas woke earlier than usual, heart rattling with anxious energy. While Roberto prepared breakfast, Jonas paced from window to window, scanning the street for any sign of Okada. At last, Roberto coaxed him to the kitchen, pushing a mug of coffee into his hands. "Eat," the older man insisted, a fatherly tone creeping into his voice. "You need your strength." Jonas nodded. He forced down a slice of toast, though his stomach churned. After pulling on a clean shirt and combing his unruly hair, he grabbed the carefully assembled folder of evidence. Tango whined as Jonas stepped outside, clearly sensing the gravity of the situation. Jonas patted the pup's head. "Stay here and look after Roberto," he said gently. "I'll be back soon." Navigating downtown traffic took longer than expected, and Jonas arrived at the courthouse breathless. He found the assigned courtroom, its heavy wooden door propped open to reveal rows of benches and a raised platform where the judge would preside. Heart-pounding, Jonas slid into a seat near the front. He recognized a few other faces from that hallway where petitions were filed, others seeking restraining orders, each with their own burdens. The air felt stale, and the fluorescent lights cast unflattering shadows on anxious faces. When the judge, a stern-looking woman in her 50s, finally took her seat, the proceedings began. Jonas listened as the clerk read off names. A few individuals testified, each receiving the judge's calm but probing questions. Jonas's mouth turned dry, his palms damp. Then his name was called, Jonas Castro, requesting a protective order against... The clerk paused, scanning a sheet. Miguel Okada. Jonas stood, stepping forward to the podium. The judge motioned for him to speak. Carefully, he explained the background. The old apartment, the alleged damages Okada blamed him for, the menacing visits, break-ins, and threatening notes. He presented the photographs, police report numbers, and even the shaky security footage. The judge leaned forward, eyes flicking from the screen to Jonas's tense posture. "Has the respondent been served with notice of this hearing?" she asked. Jonas nodded. "Yes. Officer Delgado said they mailed the paperwork a week ago." The judge sighed. "We haven't received confirmation he plans to attend." She consulted a piece of paper on her bench. "Sometimes these individuals dodge service. If he fails to appear today, I can still make a ruling, but it may be temporary." A flicker of hope rose in Jonas's chest. Maybe Okada had decided not to show. No confrontation, just a quiet judgment in Jonas's favor. Yet as the judge prepared to deliberate, the door at the rear of the courtroom creaked. Jonas swiveled, pulse jumping. There stood Okada, hair disheveled, eyes full of something beyond anger, perhaps desperation. He wore a rumpled jacket, his gaze sweeping the room before locking on Jonas. For a moment, Jonas felt everything freeze, a jolt of alarm shooting through him. No way to avoid him now. Okada shuffled forward, ignoring the clerk's attempts to guide him to a seat. "This is ridiculous," he sputtered, voice cracking with tension. "He's the one who owes me money. He broke the lease, left damage. I have rights, Your Honor." The judge rapped her gavel once for order. "Sir, you'll have a chance to speak. But first, you must follow this court's procedures." Visibly irritated, Okada pulled himself together, stepping to the opposite podium. Jonas noticed how the man's hand trembled as he shuffled his own papers. Could fear be fueling his aggression? The hearing proceeded, with Okada loudly denying any wrongdoing, claiming Jonas staged the break-ins to avoid paying alleged debt. Jonas tried to remain calm, citing the deposit that should have covered repairs. The judge frowned frequently, peering at Okada's chaotic ranting. Meanwhile, Jonas recounted each incident, referencing the timeline and police involvement. At last, the judge raised her hand. "I've heard enough. Mr. Okada, You've provided no credible evidence Jonas owes you anything beyond the normal deposit. Your allegations about a staged break-in are unsubstantiated. Jonas has produced documented proof of harassment. I'm inclined to grant a protective order." Relief surged through Jonas. He exhaled shakily, feeling his limbs tremble. But the judge continued. "Understand, Mr. Okada, that this order forbids any contact with Jonas or his residence. Violations can result in criminal charges." Okada's face turned ashen. For a split second, Jonas thought he saw a flicker of fear in the man's eyes. Then Okada's expression hardened into fury. "This is a farce," he spat, jabbing a finger at Jonas. "You might think you've won, but mark my words, you'll pay for this one way or another." The judge slammed her gavel again, voice stern. "Threats in my courtroom will not be tolerated. Please remove Mr. Okada." Two bailiffs stepped forward, guiding him toward the exit. Okada's words echoed in Jonas's mind, cold and sharp. Even with the protective order about to be signed, Jonas realized this might not stop Okada's vendetta. As the bailiffs escorted the disgruntled landlord out, Jonas forced himself to breathe, reminding himself that the law was now on his side. When the judge pronounced her final ruling, Jonas thanked her, voice quivering with relief. Moments later, Jonas found himself outside the courthouse, the drizzle replaced by a weak midday sun. He spotted Okada across the street, being ushered away by the bailiffs. Their eyes met for a brief, charged moment. Then Okada whipped around and vanished into the crowd. Jonas clutched the protective order copy, unsure whether to feel triumphant or terrified. One thing he did know: Tango would be waiting at home, tail wagging, providing the comfort Jonas desperately needed. Jonas arrived home clutching the protective order like a fragile shield. The victory in court felt hollow, given Okada's furious parting words. Yet as he climbed out of Roberto's truck, relief washed over him at the sight of Tango bounding toward the gate, ears pricked, tail a blur of excitement. The puppy's presence never failed to ground him, reminding him that their little household had one another's backs. "Any trouble?" Jonas asked Roberto, who'd stayed behind to watch the house. "Not a peep," Roberto replied. "If Okada tries anything now, he'll be digging his own grave legally." Jonas nodded, slipping inside the fence, bending to greet Tango. The dog licked his hand insistently, as if demanding reassurance. "We're okay," Jonas whispered, ruffling the shepherd's fur. The judge granted the order. Let's hope it keeps him away for good. That night, Jonas tried to relax, yet his nerves still hummed from the morning's confrontation. Despite having the protective order, Okada's final threat echoed in his mind. He busied himself making dinner, simple noodles with bits of leftover chicken, while Tango and Roberto tinkered in the living room, installing the last of the security sensors near the windows. The meal was subdued. None of them voiced it, but everyone sensed the tension bristling around the edges of the night. A phone call broke the uneasy quiet just as Jonas was putting away dishes. The screen displayed an unknown number. His stomach clenched, half expecting Okada's voice. Instead, Tasha's energetic tone crackled through the speaker. "Hey Jonas, sorry to call so late," she began. But something came up. The Philanthropic Foundation reps are hosting a small showcase event for a few advanced dogs this weekend. They invited me to bring one of our best trainees. I suggested Tango. Jonas nearly dropped the phone in surprise. "That's amazing. He's still young, though. Are you sure he's ready for another public demo?" Tasha gave a light laugh. "We won't push him beyond what he can do. It's more of a meet and greet, with some basic exercises. The foundation likes to highlight success stories, especially with rescues. And who better than you two?" A spark of hope lifted Jonas's mood. Public showcases could mean further goodwill, maybe even additional sponsorship. "I'd love to," he said. "Count us in." As soon as he hung up, he relayed the news to Roberto. For the first time that evening, smiles broke out. The possibility of showing Tango's progress in front of influential eyes hinted at a future unclouded by Okada's threats. They ended the night planning how best to prepare for the event, Jonas scribbling down a list of training drills to polish. In the morning, Jonas awoke feeling lighter. He spent his shift at the construction site with renewed focus, humming under his breath as he stacked bricks. During his lunch break, he texted Marla and Camilla, sharing the invitation to the showcase. Both friends responded with excitement, promising to attend if they could. By quitting time, Jonas was practically buzzing, eager to get home and devote the evening to working with Tango. They embarked on extra training sessions in the backyard, reviewing advanced obedience cues and perfecting Tango's recall amid noise. Jonas scattered random objects, an old glove, a squeaky toy, a cardboard box, and hid a treat in just one of them. Tango, nose quivering, would systematically check each until he found the correct hidden scent. Roberto watched from the sidelines, arms folded in satisfaction. "He's got the makings of a real detection dog," he mused. "One day, you might even see him in official K9 trials." Jonas absorbed the praise with gratitude, but also caution. Holding on to dreams felt riskier now that he'd seen how quickly life could upend them. He'd learned that every step forward could be threatened by sudden misfortune. Still, for the moment, optimism reigned. Even the protective order incident began to fade, replaced by a faint hope that maybe, just maybe, Okada would heed the judge's warning. As the showcase weekend approached, Jonas felt a mixture of excitement and nerves. Tasha wanted them at the training facility early, so they arrived at dawn. The staff bustled, arranging demonstration stations, an obstacle course, a mini scent work area, and a short agility track. Representatives from the Philanthropic Foundation began to filter in, along with a small audience of donors, community members, and dog enthusiasts. Jonas surveyed the crowd from the sidelines, Tango at his heel. Marla arrived, giving Jonas a quick hug. "You two have come so far," she said, beaming at Tango. "Remember that first class at the community center? He was just a frail pup, but you both had that spark." Camilla appeared moments later, smiling broadly while snapping photos on her phone, as if she too sensed the significance of this day. When Tasha called them forward, Jonas wiped his damp palms on his jeans and took a steadying breath. The demonstration was low-key compared to the previous formal presentation, but it mattered. Several dogs went first, showcasing therapy skills or advanced service tasks. Then Tasha motioned Jonas and Tango to the front. Under the bright overhead lights, Jonas recalled how they'd once performed in front of judges, hearts thumping. This time, though, he felt tangibly calmer. He trusted Tango implicitly, and the crowd wasn't hostile. They started with basic obedience, a crisp heel, a smooth sit, a down stay. Tango executed each command with near-flawless precision. Next came a small detection task. Tasha discreetly hid a pouch containing a pungent training odor behind a row of chairs. Jonas signaled Tango, who sniffed the air, trotted around, then halted, pawing the third chair. Polite applause rippled through the small audience. A grin tugged at Jonas's lips. This quiet success felt even sweeter without the high stakes of competition. Finally, Jonas demonstrated a tiny bit of protective stance training. Roberto, acting as a volunteer decoy, approached Jonas in a mock-threatening manner. Tango stepped forward, barking sharply, yet refrained from lunging until Jonas gave the release command. The watchers murmured in admiration. Even though Tango was still a puppy, his focus was remarkable. When it concluded, Tasha offered Jonas the mic to share Tango's rescue story. Palms slick, Jonas cleared his throat. "Just a few months ago, I found Tango on the street, starving and alone. I wasn't sure I could afford to keep him or give him the life he deserved. But thanks to people believing in us, trainers, fosters, and kind souls who donated, we're here, showing that a forgotten stray can become something extraordinary." The applause that followed held genuine warmth. Jonas felt tears prick his eyes, overcome by gratitude for everyone who'd helped them reach this point. Afterward, the crowd dispersed to mingle. Jonas chatted with a few donors while Tango basked in pats and compliments. One older gentleman with a neat gray suit singled Jonas out. "I hear your dog might be eligible for advanced detection certification," he said, nodding toward Tango. "If you ever consider joining a formal program, reach out. We have resources in place for promising teams." He handed Jonas a business card that read, "Cardinal Security Consulting." Jonas thanked him, tucking the card in his pocket. Camilla and Marla beamed nearby, proud as if they'd watched a child graduate. Roberto wore a satisfied grin, nodding in approval whenever someone complimented Tango. Despite the lingering threat of Okada's wrath, Jonas dared to imagine a future where Tango's talents opened doors. As they packed up, Tasha congratulated Jonas on the strong impression. "You'll likely hear from them again soon," she said, gesturing at the handful of donors who lingered. "They love this underdog narrative, no pun intended. Keep your phone handy." Back at the house, Jonas shared the day's highlights with Tango, rewarding him with a generous serving of fresh dog food. Roberto raised an eyebrow in amused disbelief. From street stray to potential star of security demos, if Nina could see this, I bet she'd be wagging her tail in approval. Nina was Roberto's old German shepherd, the dog whose memory had partly inspired his willingness to help Jonas. They ate dinner, celebrating quietly. The conversation drifted to potential next steps, maybe a part-time job at the facility or another philanthropic event. Jonas felt buoyant, a state he hadn't experienced in ages. The dread that once hovered felt distant. Even when he walked Tango around the block, he didn't constantly look over his shoulder. The protective order was in effect, and maybe that had finally sunk in for Okada. Yet fate had another twist in store. Late that night, Jonas woke to frantic barking. Adrenaline surged, and he bolted upright, heart pounding. Lights flickered from Roberto's room, and Jonas heard him shout, "What's going on?" Tango's growl echoed down the hallway, deep and menacing, unlike the playful puppy Jonas knew. That sound alone was enough to freeze Jonas's blood. Something was very wrong. Jonas yanked open the front door to find Tango standing on the porch, fur bristling, barking at a figure attempting to jimmy the padlock on the backyard gate. The motion sensor light illuminated the intruder in stark relief. Jonas recognized Okada's frame instantly, this time wearing a hooded jacket, his posture crouched and desperate. A crowbar glinted in his left hand. All the courage Jonas had mustered seemed to drain away in a rush of terror. His mind raced. The protective order, the law. But here Okada was, blatantly violating it, armed with a crowbar at midnight. Across the threshold, Roberto appeared, brandishing a phone. "The police are on their way," he hollered. Okada spun, wild-eyed. For a fleeting moment, Jonas thought the man might flee. Instead, Okada let out a strangled curse, then lunged forward, as though to silence Roberto or force his way inside. Tango launched from the porch, intercepting Okada with a bark that rattled Jonas's bones. The intruder recoiled, nearly dropping the crowbar. Roberto screamed for Jonas to get inside. He didn't want anyone hurt, but Jonas stood frozen, heart hammering at the sight of Tango risking himself. In a blur, Okada swung the crowbar, trying to ward off the dog. Tango dodged, growling. Jonas snapped out of his daze. "Tango, here!" he shouted, voice trembling. The shepherd hesitated, torn between protecting Jonas and obeying the command. Okada seized that moment, breaking for the fence, stumbling in his panic. Two bright beams of headlights spilled into the yard as a patrol car screeched to a stop outside. Relief coursed through Jonas. Police officers jumped out, guns drawn, yelling orders for Okada to drop the crowbar. Okada staggered, eyes frantic, then let the metal bar clatter to the ground. Tango barked again but retreated at Jonas's repeated call. Within seconds, the officers pinned Okada against the fence. Jonas stood shaking, barely processing the chaos. Roberto approached slowly, panting, phone in hand. Everything felt surreal. The red-blue glare of sirens, the adrenaline pounding in Jonas's ears, the weight of Tango's muzzle against his leg. Police cuffed Okada, reading him his rights with clipped efficiency. An officer glanced at Jonas. "You have a protective order against him?" Jonas nodded, voice shaky. "Yes, I do." Okada glared over his shoulder, spitting out bitter words, but Jonas barely heard. The officer motioned for paramedics, explaining that Okada had a bruise from where he collided with the fence. Meanwhile, Tango, still keyed up, pressed close to Jonas, scanning the yard for any lingering threat. As the officers led Okada away, Jonas fought a tidal wave of conflicting emotions. Relief, horror, anger, and an odd, profound sadness that it had come to this. Roberto gently squeezed Jonas's shoulder. "He's done," he murmured, gaze serious. "He violated the order. He won't walk away from this." Jonas pulled in a shaky breath, trembling fingers stroking Tango's fur. "I hope you're right," he whispered, clinging to the faithful shepherd who'd now saved him twice, once from the grips of despair on the street, and now from a violent man in the dead of night. The police lights painted the quiet neighborhood in intermittent flashes of red and blue, their glare reflecting off dewy grass and the scattered tools in Roberto's yard. Once Okada was driven away in the patrol car, Jonas finally stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. His legs felt rubbery, and his lungs worked as if he had sprinted miles. Tango, equally tense, stayed glued to his side, broad chest rising and falling in shallow bursts. Roberto flicked off the porch light and turned to lock the deadbolt, the house falling into a breathless hush. It was over, or so they desperately wanted to believe. Adrenaline still rushed through Jonas's veins, denying him any chance of rest. He paced the living room while Roberto double-checked the new security feeds, ensuring footage of Okada's attempted break-in had been captured. Outside, faint voices of neighbors drifted on the night air. Some had gathered to see the flashing lights, exchanging hushed updates about what had happened. Tango followed Jonas's every move, watchful and protective, as if waiting for any new threat to burst through the walls. At last, Roberto placed a comforting hand on Jonas's shoulder, urging him to sit. Neither said much. There was no language that could fully unravel the knot of fear and anger that twisted inside Jonas. Eventually, Jonas sank onto the sofa with a trembling sigh, glancing down at Tango. The puppy rested his chin on Jonas's knee, eyes soft with empathy. It struck Jonas then how their bond had shifted. He'd rescued Tango from the unforgiving streets, but tonight, Tango had returned the favor by confronting a danger Jonas had barely been prepared to face. Leaning forward, Jonas hugged the dog gently around the neck. "Thank you," he murmured, voice unsteady. The single word held everything he couldn't verbalize: relief, love, gratitude, and a lingering tinge of sorrow for what they had endured. Roberto made tea, and they drank in silence. Outside, the last patrol car pulled away, leaving behind a street that felt simultaneously safer and more fragile than ever. Jonas knew that if Okada's actions were deemed a violation of the protective order, the man could face serious charges. That knowledge offered some consolation, but Jonas also remembered the wild desperation in Okada's eyes. It was as though the landlord had been spiraling out of control, consumed by a need for revenge that no legal barrier could fully stifle. Still, the presence of the law was not meaningless. Okada had chosen to flee the moment the sirens appeared, and that alone proved that official consequences held weight. By dawn, Jonas had slipped into a fitful doze on the couch. Tango curled at his feet. The nightmares came in waves, scenarios where Okada stormed the house again, or shadowy figures roamed the yard in endless loops. But each time Jonas jerked awake, he felt Tango's steady warmth, which reminded him that at least in this moment they were safe. When morning finally arrived, Jonas woke to find Roberto making breakfast. The older man looked tired but resolute, sliding a plate of scrambled eggs onto the table without a word. Jonas silently thanked him, too drained to converse, and ate methodically while Tango munched on his own meal. Late that afternoon, an unexpected visitor appeared, the same police officer who had responded to the break-in. He explained that Okada was in custody pending formal charges. According to the officer, the evidence, plus prior incidents, strongly indicated that Okada would not easily slip through the cracks this time. Jonas felt a wave of relief so profound it nearly buckled his knees. For months he had lived in fear of a man who seemed unstoppable. Now at last, the cycle appeared broken. The officer stressed that the legal process could be slow, but Jonas should remain vigilant. With a polite nod and a tip of his cap, the officer left, leaving Jonas and Roberto staring at each other in stunned silence. Perhaps Jonas dared hope they were free. Over the next few days, Jonas found it difficult to relax entirely. Each time he rounded a corner, the memory of Okada's sneer and the glint of a crowbar danced in his mind. Yet life's routines demanded attention. Jonas still had a full-time job at the construction site, and Tango's advanced training schedule continued. On top of that, the Philanthropic Foundation had scheduled a follow-up meeting to discuss potential additional grants. Jonas channeled his anxious energy into preparing for that meeting, gathering updated videos of Tango's progress and referencing Tasha's glowing evaluation. His aim was clear. They needed more funds if Tango was to reach truly professional levels of detection or protection training. That Friday, Jonas stood in front of his battered sedan, about to drive to the training facility for a final practice before the foundation meeting. The sky was bright, the air humming with the promise of a clear day. As he ushered Tango into the passenger seat, he caught himself marveling at how the puppy had filled out over these past months. Gone was the fragile stray, replaced by a confident young shepherd with strong muscles rippling beneath his glossy coat. Jonas started the engine, smiling as Tango stuck his nose out the window, sniffing the wind. A sense of forward momentum swelled in Jonas's chest, a confidence he scarcely recognized in himself. Tasha greeted them warmly at the facility, eager to help finalize the demonstration that would wow the foundation reps. For an hour, they ran through drills. Tango practiced ignoring tempting distractions, retrieving objects from behind obstacles, and maintaining a calm, protective stance on command. Marla dropped by to watch, smiling proudly at how refined Tango's movements had become. A few onlookers asked Jonas questions about rescue dog transformations, scribbling notes in small journals as if they wanted to replicate his methods. Jonas felt almost shy under the attention, reminding them that Tango's success was largely thanks to the patient guidance he'd received from trainers and friends. Nevertheless, he brimmed with pride at the possibility that Tango's story might inspire others. Sunday dawned with a hushed brightness, as though the world itself decided to pause for this milestone. Jonas and Tango arrived early at the Philanthropic Foundation's downtown office, an elegant building lined with tall windows. Tasha met them in the lobby, wearing a crisp blazer that immediately reminded Jonas this was a formal meeting. Nevertheless, the staff seemed friendly, ushering them to a spacious conference room. Representatives from various branches of the foundation sat around a polished table, flipping through portfolios and occasionally peeking over at Tango, who lay obediently at Jonas's feet. Once introductions concluded, Jonas queued up the videos. The small screen on the conference table played footage of Tango weaving through an agility course, pausing at each command with flawless timing. Another clip showed him sniffing out a concealed target in a cluttered warehouse setting, wagging his tail in triumph the moment he found the hidden item. A concluding montage revealed photographs of Tango from the day Jonas had found him, all bony limbs and timid eyes transforming gradually into the robust and spirited dog now resting by Jonas's chair. Tasha narrated the progression in soft, confident tones, explaining how the partial grant had allowed them to lay a solid training foundation. When the final video ended, the room fell silent. One of the foundation members leaned forward, hands clasped. "We are all immensely moved by this story," he said, voice resonating with sincerity. "Our goal is to fund programs that not only rescue animals, but empower them and their human partners to serve the broader community. Tango is a shining example." His gaze swept the room before resting on Jonas. "We're prepared to increase funding to help you pursue advanced certifications. But we'd like to know, what are your long-term plans for this dog?" Jonas swallowed, realizing how pivotal his next words would be. He glanced at Tasha, then at Tango, who blinked up at him with a calm sense of expectation. "I want Tango to keep learning," Jonas said simply. "He has the potential to help people, whether it's in search and rescue, detection, or even therapy-based work. I also hope to inspire others to see how a life on the brink can turn around if someone cares enough." A hush spread across the table as Jonas's voice quivered with emotion. "That's what Tango did for me." The foundation members exchanged glances and nodded in unison. As they offered their commitment to provide additional sponsorship, Jonas felt an overpowering gratitude that made his vision blur for a second. All those nights of fear, the run-ins with Okada, the uncertainty, now they seemed to culminate in a chance at lasting security. He thanked them earnestly, promising to uphold the trust they were placing in him and his dog. Late that afternoon, Jonas returned home with Tango, both riding a wave of elation. Roberto, who'd remained behind, beamed when Jonas relayed the good news about the extended funding. They talked into the evening about what it might mean. Private lessons with specialized mentors, official K9 certifications, maybe even a role in community outreach programs. The future felt wide open, and for the first time, Jonas allowed himself to relish it without flinching. A week later, with Okada formally charged and awaiting trial, the tension around the house lifted. The sabotage and stalking that had haunted Jonas since that fateful day he rescued Tango finally seemed to dissolve. Time moved on, and so did their lives. Jonas rose daily before dawn, dedicated to each training session, forging an ever deeper bond with the shepherd, who had once been abandoned on a sidewalk. Under Tasha's guidance, they enrolled in specialized courses that refined Tango's detection abilities. Soon, word of Tango's prowess spread beyond the local scene, and offers of demonstration appearances filtered in. Each one Jonas weighed carefully, mindful that he never wanted Tango's gift to feel exploited. Rather, he saw it as a chance to show the world how a neglected stray could transform into a symbol of hope. 6 months after Okada's arrest, Jonas and Tango stood in a bustling auditorium, preparing for their first major official trial in detection work. Other teams milled about, law enforcement groups, private security consultants, and volunteer search dog partnerships. Jonas, wearing a newly acquired uniform with Tango's name embroidered on the side, felt a ripple of nerves. Yet as they stepped onto the trial course, he recalled everything they'd overcome, from the scorching sidewalk where he'd scooped Tango up, to the looming specter of Okada, to the hush of court hearings. Now, with the philanthropic foundation's support and a community of allies cheering from afar, they were poised to prove that resilience beat fear. The test demanded precision, speed, and unwavering trust between handler and dog. Tango scanned the environment, nose wrinkling in concentration, bounding toward each possible hiding spot with calm intensity. Jonas directed him with subtle hand signals, breath tight in his chest. It felt like dancing, each step guided by mutual respect. When Tango discovered the final concealed item, letting out a sharp bark to alert Jonas, Applause burst from onlookers. Jonas knelt, joy radiating. Beneath that overhead glare, he embraced Tango, tears pricking his eyes. They had come through darkness into light, building a future far beyond the shattered limits of the past. In the days that followed, Jonas received official notice that Tango had passed the trial with flying colors. Several invitations poured in, each praising the dog's exceptional performance. Sponsors congratulated Jonas, hinting at fresh opportunities. Alone in the yard one evening, Jonas tossed a ball for Tango, watching the shepherd sprint across the lawn in a blur of motion. Nightfall crept in, and with it a profound sense of gratitude. Despite every obstacle, they'd not only survived, they'd flourished. Tango, panting happily, brought the ball back, tail wagging with uncontained glee. Jonas ruffled the dog's ears. "Come on, partner," he said softly, voice catching in his throat. "Our story's just getting started."